All right. All right. Thank you, everybody. Good morning. Again, thank you so much for your patience as we were working through some tech difficulties. My name is Yeli Garcia. I'm the manager of youth engagement at American Forest. My colleague Jamie is out on vacation, but it's my pleasure to host you today. It's a really great to meet all of you. If you're joining us for the first time, thank you. And thank you for those who are returning. Again, thank you for bearing through the tech difficulties. Our community of practice is focused on true equity, and we continue to meet monthly and connecting across our various practices, hearing case studies from leaders, and advancing true equity together. While everybody gets settled in, I'm going to go ahead and start projecting my screen and introduce our two presenters. Okay. Oh, and I also want to introduce the concept of tree equity. Tree equity can be a loaded term, but in concept and in practice, it's simply providing more tree and tree benefits to everybody. Sometimes that means providing, prioritizing underserved communities to make up for historic and ongoing injustices. We at American Forest are working hard to assist leaders across the country as they reimagine their communities into better places for everybody to live. Please let us know how we can help, and we're standing by. We are taking a hiatus this summer to bring the coaching, but we'll bring back the coaching network soon, better than ever. Please stay tuned to receive invitations to new and improved coaching network sessions later this year. And we will go to our two presenters, Dr. Morgan Grove and Joe Lennon. But afterwards, if you would like to stick around for some discussion directly with our presenters, we'll have an after party and I will post a link to the chat where you can join us. And that won't be a webinar format. It'll just be a sort of discussion format where everybody can raise hands, answer questions, and everything. Here is the link to the after party in the chat. Oh, sorry. For everyone. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our two guest speakers. So Dr. Morgan Grove is a lecturer at the Yale School of the Environment and the co-chair of Baltimore City Sustainability Commission. Morgan left the USDA Forest Service after 30 years, where he was a social scientist and team leader for the USDA Forest Service Baltimore Urban Field Station and had served as a scholar in residence at SESYNC, the National Socio-Environmental Synthesis Center. Morgan continues as co-principal investigator at the Baltimore Ecosystem Study, which began in 1997. And over time, Morgan has received several awards for his local work in Baltimore and its national and international relevance. In 2001, Morgan received the President's Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers for his interdisciplinary research, and the Forest Service's Science and Delivery and Technology Transfer Awards for his work in decision makers to use science in their policies and management. Morgan is the lead author of the Baltimore School of Urban Ecology, Space, Scale, and Time for Study of Cities, which advances the new School of Urban Ecology for the 21st century. And Morgan has a BA from Yale College and a dual degree in Architecture and Environmental Studies, an MFS from Community Forestry from Yale University, and a PhD from Social Ecology from Yale University. And we also have our presenter, Joe Lennon. Joe Lennon is a forest utilization and marketing specialist coordinating the Urban Wood Program and biochar project for the Commonwealth of Virginia. Joe led the effort to establish the formation of the Virginia Urban Wood Group in 2017. Joe attained his BS degree in Forestry and Wildlife Management from Purdue University and has worked for the Virginia Department of Forestry since 1979, spending most of his career as an area forester for the Shenandoah Valley Work Area. He is presently serving as Public Information Officer on the VDOF Incident Management Team. Is an International Society of Arborists certified arborist and serves as a board member of the Virginia Urban Forest Council and Unified Wood Economy. Joe is also an Education and Outreach Committee member for the Urban Wood Network, and in 2021 served as a special assistant to the Virginia Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry. He's also logging out and logging back in because he's having that audio difficulty. So Dr. Morgan's going to get us started today. Dr. Morgan, are you ready to present?
Yep, yep. Will you be able to load the slides and then I'll just ask you to forward them?
Yes.
Okay.
I am. Reset my share screen. And there
Okay,
we go.
Joe's getting back on.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
we
we can
can.
hear you.
Yay. All right. Fingers crossed.
All right, hang in there.
All right. I'm handing it
Today,
over to you both.
great. Today, Joe and I are very excited to talk to you about urban wood and the idea that where opportunities and traditions meet is a place where we can actually pursue the idea of urban and one might say urban and community wood. Next slide. Too often there's this notion that rural and urban community forestry are two very separate things. In fact, there's a great deal of overlap and complementarity that exists. However, there may be a difference in emphasis. And so we introduce this idea that from both rural and urban forestry, there are goods, there are benefits, and there are services that come from those types of forest management practices. However, the emphasis may be different. So for instance, with rural forestry, there may be an emphasis quite often on wood products coming out of the forest. There may be certain benefits that are associated with those activities, including economic prosperity, community cohesion, services such as water production and water quality, biodiversity, and beauty. In contrast, but yet still complementary, is urban forest management. And here we may be focused less on the goods and more on the benefits, such as community cohesion and those ideas of services of water, air quality, biodiversity, beauty, and goods potentially of wood products. And a takeaway from this is less that this is an exhaustive list, rather the complementarity and also the difference in the areas of emphasis that we have between rural forestry and urban forestry.
Yeah, absolutely, Morgan. And one thing that a lot of people kind of have forgotten to realize that even though urban forests are not necessarily made and managed for products, the fact that products are always come out of the urban forests across the United States. And you'll see in a moment as to how much wood comes out of the urban forest that heads to the landfills each year. But wood products, you could call them byproducts. You could call them, products of the fact that, that trees are pruned every year, trees are removed every year. Trees in the urban environment have a certain sense of mortality, maybe quicker than what you would see in the rural environment. But wood products are definitely part of a whole urban forestry picture and, need to be accounted for in the management of that resource.
Exactly. And I think a distinction here too that goes along with this is that the principal profession in rural forestry is a forester, and they're used to creating and generating products. In urban forestry, the main professional is the arborist, and they're used to selling services. And so an observation has been made that in rural forest management, foresters need to learn how to sell and produce services more. And additionally, in urban areas, the arborist needs to learn how to produce products as well as providing services. Here we go to the
And
next
like
slide.
and like
Go
yeah, and
ahead.
like Morgan Sorry. And like Morgan indicated on that slide, with rural forests, there's economic prosperity. And it's almost, for some people, that's an expectation of owning a rural forest, is that, it can be for some folks, a source of income over periods of time. Whereas urban forestry, that's definitely not really a priority at all as far as, revenue for the city or for the municipality from products that come out of the urban forest.
So we have some challenges in rural forestry that are increasing. And one of them is the adaptability of the forest industry in terms of capacity and markets. And we'll foreshadow here that perhaps there's things that we learn from urban forestry that perhaps could be informative for rural forestry. But some of those challenges for the moment are dealing with a variety of different species instead of maximizing for producing only from one species, whether it's longleaf yellow pine or white oak or black walnut, that increasingly they're having to become more and more adaptable to different kinds of demands for species, different size dimensions, and different volumes. And why is volumes and dimension species all important here? It affects your capacities in terms of both processing the logs into dimensional lumber and crucially drying it, which creates its own challenges because how you dry is dependent upon all three of those variables, species, dimensions, and volumes, and also adjusting to market fluctuations in terms of the demand, and that they're seeing the inability or challenges in exporting is becoming something that's increasingly more difficult. And what is wood being used for? We're losing a lot of the demand for wood for flooring due to engineered flooring. And so there's a lot of challenges that are happening, and we face a forest industry that is aging in terms of the equipment and in the ownership and perhaps in the training of the staff. And there's a great reluctance to make changes. Another word for adapting. And so there's some real headwinds that the rural forestry is facing at this time.
Yeah, and you make some great points, Morgan, and a lot of people don't realize that timber is actually a commodity,
Mhm.
just like orange juice and pork bellies, and that as a commodity, market fluctuations and outside influences greatly affect how it's produced. The revenue that both the sawmills and wood businesses and wood industries receive for the product, for the end product, and also what the landowners receive as far as the revenue when they go to sell timber. I'll never forget years ago when China was in a really big boom, as far as building go, the demand for yellow poplar was just astronomical. And in the yellow poplar market, here in the United States, kind of ebbed and flowed based on the Chinese economy. When China was building, just an incredible amount of housing units over there, their demand for yellow poplar from the United States, was just huge. And that meant even landowners in rural counties in Alabama or Virginia or Pennsylvania, they receive more money for the trees that were in their woods just based on the market fluctuations and demands, that is happening thousands of miles away. The
Yeah.
same thing is true for today. The Chinese market has contracted. There's all the trade issues that are going on and the tariffs that are going on, and so all these affect what is happening to the market within the United States. And as Morgan just said, even internal markets within the country, as far as alternative products for wood, or the fact that not as many single family housing units are being built like what we have historically built, and that's been going on for a number of years now. all that tends to affect the markets for rural forestry and the landowners and of course the companies that produce those products.
Next slide. So we also face some challenges in urban forestry. And to recognize first, in terms of the actors that are out there, is that we have about 19,500 municipalities in around 3,000 counties in the US. One of the reasons we showed this information is that in some cases, the counties are the municipality. And so, for instance, in the state of Maryland, most of the decisions are made at the county level. In other states, it's at the municipal level. We have a lot of actors, and if you combine those two, we're about 22,500 actors in this. At the same time, we have more wood that goes into urban landfills than is currently harvested from our U.S. national forests. And one of the really take-home messages from that is the magnitude of the amount of wood. And so for these 19,500 municipalities, 3,000 counties, is to recognize that every single one of them has got an urban wood problem. And that plays into how do we dispose of all this wood, particularly at the time where we're facing the situation where landfills are no longer accepting wood. So where is it going to go? There's a huge amount. It's got to go somewhere. And as we're doing this, we have challenges in terms of where are we going to plant trees. We're competing with the gray spaces, the gray infrastructure that exists in cities. So, like, where are we going to be planting trees at the same time? And our costs of tree planting and maintenance is skyrocketing as well. So, we have a lot of challenges that we face, and so the need is to find a solution or a set of solutions that solve multiple problems. And this is one of the things that we need to address, particularly for the historic focus in urban and community forestry on tree planting and maintenance, is that as conceived, disposing of the wood is a negative externality. It's not part of the equation for what we need to do. So we need to bring this into the equation and find novel ways to solve this and perhaps create goods, benefits, and services that serves everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And our point on the slide from green to gray is something that municipal arborists and green infrastructure planners face all the time. Trying to keep the canopy cover going, trying to make sure that it's a vibrant urban forest, and yet all the time, they're kind of fighting against the fact that they're losing trees and green space to gray infrastructure as these municipalities and communities expand. And so just trying to keep up with that all the time, you know, like you indicated, Morgan, increase the cost of tree planting, the maintenance, and it seems like you're always starting over, as far as trying to develop the canopy in these communities. The cost of urban wood disposal, I mean, that's become a huge thing too. And like you indicated, landfills are not necessarily open, to having wood brought to their facilities anymore, which means, these communities have to find alternative uses. And we encourage them, when they're thinking about the management of their urban forest resource, that they consider urban wood as part of the full circle management. Just because the tree is at the end of their biological lives, you just don't forget about it. That wood is still a resource that can be used for a variety of products. Like my mentor once told me, not every tree that dies in the urban forest is going to make a table. You've got to have a suite, of products you can make from these trees that are coming out of the built environment. Yes, some are going to make beautiful tables. Others are going to admittedly make mulch. And some are going to be transformed into biochar and to be used in urban forest plantings again.
Great points, Joe. As you were talking, it reminded me too to bring up the issue that we have increasingly we have extreme weather events, and that creates a huge pulse of wood, and we need to figure out what to do with that wood because at times it just gets put into piles and is burned, and which, crushes all of our souls to see
Yeah,
wood go up in
yeah,
that way. And
absolutely.
we've got to come up with better ways to do it.
And
So,
Morgan, you brought up a good point. I happened to be on an urban forest strike team that went to Nashville earlier this year. You know, they had a devastating ice storm in Nashville. I mean, it was just huge, and the amount of wood that I saw piled up around Nashville was just amazing, and everything was ground into mulch. And yay, the fact that they had some pretty good prior planning as far as the disposal sites, as far as getting the necessary contractors in there, to handle the materials. But gosh, there were some really large trees that might have been able to make solid wood products that unfortunately were headed to the big old grinders. And like you were saying, breaks your heart, but we understand. I mean, it's
yeah,
an emergency situation. Their goal, especially initially, is life and property, get the electricity on, get the water going, make sure everybody's safe, get the streets open for emergency services. But, at some point in time, when we're talking about emergency response and emergency planning and how we react to that, we need to somehow consider, okay, we have something here that can really, be a long-term product as far as carbon storage and something that would really go way beyond just the use of a really beautiful log as a mulch product. So yeah,
yeah,
we still have a lot of work to do.
yeah, and there needs to be some innovative thinking in that. Like, where can we take the wood to get it out of the way and then get back to it later, for instance?
Exactly.
Can we go to the next slide? So, returning to the title of this talk, where opportunities and traditions meet, we'd like to talk about sort of five different points: bringing together goods, benefits, and services, addressing the motivations for wood utilization and building partnerships, learning from rural forestry, expanding the financial proposition, and thinking small. So, if we go to the next slide. So when we want to bring together these goods, benefits, and services, there's two ways we suggest to think about tree use in urban and community forestry. One is the indirect way for tree planting and care. So through the wood reuse, tree reuse that we're proposing, they become material inputs for tree planting. They become the wood chips, mulch, and tree stakes, and then they help you to reduce the cost for those things, for tree planting and maintenance materials, and expenditures for wood disposal. So that's on one side of the equation. The second side of the equation is the direct community goods, benefits, and services from wood reuse. And again, this list is not exhaustive, but it can, as Joe was mentioning earlier, be one of the ways to create economic prosperity, creating skills, jobs, businesses, and markets in wood products. The second is education about wood products and making things out of wood, becoming a locavore. And this is something that is increasingly important to people who live in cities. And then the emotional, relational appreciation, value, and preference for wood products in general, and local in particular with the language that rural forestry already employs. And these are really critical features that could play a benefit not only for how people think about the urban areas where they live and that they are productive places, as well as being smart about how we run things, but also perhaps expanding our appreciation for the opportunity to connect with wood, whether that wood is coming from urban areas or from rural areas.
Yeah, great points for sure. And I think, one of the coolest things that we've seen here in Virginia are some of the communities that are using the wood that comes out of their municipal forest and putting it right back into like the products you're saying, Morgan, like wood chips or mulch or tree stakes that help to support, the forests that are planted this year. and expanding on that, the same thing is that some of our communities are starting to make biochar, and then that biochar is mixed with compost, and that also goes into the tree planting of new trees, and so it's just like this complete circular cycle of resources that some municipalities are starting to embrace and that they really see a great benefit, not only monetarily, but also just in the whole conservation, of being good stewards of the urban forest resources. Your point about being a locavore, and I think we've all experienced this. People in today's time love the fact, that products are produced locally, that they can support their neighbors who produce those products, that they can support local businesses, be it a winery, be it a brewery, be it somebody that's making beautiful tables, being somebody like a local butcher or whatever. And so consequently, it's just this wonderful thing that people from across the United States really have begun to embrace the local economies because they see direct benefits from doing that. The fact that keeping the money, within the local area just really helps, to bolster that local economy and give opportunities to just a whole new sector of people. So that, especially when you're trying to retain, the younger generation and young talent and young artisans in your area, the fact that they can maybe do that, through this emerging wood economy is just a great thing. It really is.
Yeah. And as you were talking, Joe, it reminded me, an example here in Baltimore with the sawmill, the city-owned, city-run sawmill, which is known as Camp Small, is to recognize that while we may focus on these municipalities and counties, is that there's lots of people who are planting trees, community groups, civic organizations for business sectors and so on. And so Camp Small provides those wood chips and mulch and tree stakes for free to those other actors and delivers the material. And so it's a yes and operation of being very inclusive of everyone in the tree planting and tree care sector. And what we're also seeing is that there's currently a shortage of mulch, and there's a huge demand for it. And so Camp Small, which processes 9,000 tons of wood every year, is can't keep enough mulch in stock because there's such a demand for it. Next slide. So as we think about this, there's different ways of organizing and conceiving of what wood utilization may look like. And it doesn't presume that government agencies are going to run it. It could be government agencies. You could find a nonprofit organization to run it. You could find a business to run it, or it could be partnerships. And that there's sort of four motivations or outcomes that one can imagine. From the city's perspective, there could be generating revenue. So at Camp Small in Baltimore, it is fully self-sufficient based upon revenue. It covers all of the operational costs and it covers all of the staff time. They don't charge below market rates for any of the materials that they generate. That would be unfair in competing with the private sector. There's other operations like in Memphis where they're generating an immense amount of profit. There's also the avoided costs. If Camp Small in Baltimore wasn't running, the bill would be about $900,000 a year to dispose of all that wood every year. It's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, and the job is never done. But then there's also these community goods and benefits uh, and services that come out of this. And we were talking about some of those, and Joe was giving some illustrations about the roles that and when you start to scratch the surface, you find that there's many different ways that people want to use wood, but then there's the benefits and services. We have school groups, so third graders coming and visiting Camp Small and learning about the trees and not only about growing trees, but what can be done when the trees come down and there are program build stools out of the wood that they get from Camp Small. And in doing so, like how do you and want to you know you it's challenging to think about all these different ways that this can happen. And so one has to be open to building partnerships and innovating, much like rural forestry is in a challenge where they need to innovate. And so one of the things that comes from both improv comedy and improv jazz is this idea of saying, of listening with big ears and listening before talking, right? And this idea of saying yes and the killers to improv, the killers to partnerships are yes but and no but. And so saying yes and how can we play together? And we're purposefully using this word play because it requires a little bit of playfulness of what are the cool, great things that we can um, come together on and to not shut down the conversations. And so I think that we've seen this in Baltimore. And I think, Joe, you've seen the same thing in Virginia.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of what you're saying, Morgan, is not to be afraid of letting go.
Hmm.
Sometimes we have a problem with letting go and also not being afraid to kind of share the spotlight with other people. Um, the most successful urban wood programs that we have seen are ones that are not all, the municipality doing everything. That doesn't work well. There's just so many things going on, for municipality staff. They can't do it. They can't do everything, and they shouldn't be expected to do everything. Bringing in private sector partners is huge because everybody benefits. The private sector partners benefit from exposure, from sales, from doing, it's almost like we give them a stage for community outreach in
Hmm.
some of these communities. In other words, we invite the audience, we give them the stage. All they have to do is walk out there and do their thing, something they know very well. And so this private public partnership is absolutely key to the success of these wood programs. And the same is true with, as far as, like you were saying about the schools. One thing that's really been big in Virginia, and it's just blossomed over the past few years, is these outdoor learning spaces or outdoor learning activity areas that incorporate wood products, from the communities in which they're being built, be it at municipal parks or city schools or wherever. I know, for instance, Washington, D.C., teachers can actually go online to their forestry department in Washington and order, a table or stools or benches or whatever. And then the municipality, helps to make it all happen. They're delivered to the school, and then the teachers have exactly what they were hoping for. The coolest thing ever, and it's not really that hard. It's just one of these things of being able to think outside the box, to use an old cliche, and just kind of be open, to bigger, better ideas that don't necessarily have to be that complex, but can really get a lot of things done, just by building those partnerships, being innovative. And the key is yes, and
Yeah. And
absolutely.
Joe, you reminded me in talking about the outdoor applications is that there's certain trees that are planted in through urban forestry, so honey locust, Zelkova, and then you have mulberry, and then you also have a lot of black locust in cities, and of course you have white oak, and all of those species are rot resistant. And some of those species like Zelkova, Zelkovas, they branch low, but when once they're cut down and they're on their side, that it's a perfect bench length. And so these species you wouldn't find coming out of rural forest products. but they're coming out of urban areas and they actually are sort of, in a sense, pre-adapted for these outdoor applications and doing these play structures and benches and all sorts of things. And so, the traditional forester would look askance at honey locust, but boy, is it a great wood to use for these outdoor applications.
Yeah, absolutely. And the beauty of the outdoor applications, Morgan, is that we're not looking for perfectly straight trees,
No.
like you do from the rural forest. Where the trees are tall, the trunks are straight. We want character for the outdoor learning areas. So that it brings interest and it brings challenges, for the kids that want to climb all over them.
Yeah, absolutely. Next slide, please. So in thinking about this, and someone who uh, both Joe and I work with a lot, would say, okay, well, you're processing these logs and making slabs, but what are you going to do with the rest of the tree? And uh, and it's always Charlie Becker, and it's always a great point, which is, to recognize that you have a range of volumes that are coming into the yard, and they have a range of different values. And the slabs, historically have been worth a lot of money, but you don't have a whole lot of it. And dimensional lumber, again, you're going to find markets for it, but you don't have a whole lot of value for it. What you do have a lot of is wood chips, compost, and wood stakes, but not a whole lot of value for it. So, one is to figure out, okay, how are what are we going to do with all of the tree material that's coming in? And then also working, and this is true both in urban and rural areas, is like, okay, can we create more value out of the high volume things? Can we create thermally modified wood? So we have a lot of tulip poplar, or as Joe says, yellow poplar. That's a cultural distinction, I think, is can we make thermally modified lumber out of it, which has great outdoor applications? Can we create cultural products? For various types of things, and we're seeing this coming out of Hawaii, is the cultural things, making surfboards, for instance. And then biochar is something that's really coming up and is going to have a lot of potential applications. So these are both what can we do existing and becoming good at existing, and being well prepared and positioned for the emerging kinds of products that can come out. And the point is that among all these things, you got to deal with all of the different wood material that's coming in. And if you're stuck with, if you figure out how to solve dimensional lumber, but you're sitting around with a lot of wood chips, you're also gonna, have some real issues at hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of us know in the audience in this webinar knows that this material keeps coming and keeps coming and keeps
Yeah.
coming. And it keeps coming, yearly, daily, as a matter of fact. And then you throw in, a big natural disaster like the ice storm in Nashville, Hurricane Helene, which affected Western North Carolina, Southwest Virginia. All of a sudden you get this huge input of material. And like Morgan says, what do you do with that? And you've got to be prepared, and you've got to do market development ahead of that, so that with the markets in place, and you're having a better vibrant economy for these wood products coming out of the urban built environments, then they can start to handle more of those huge inputs from the natural disasters. And instead of scrambling all the time and saying, oh my gosh, what are we going to do with this, what are we going to do with that, what do we do now, all that is kind of all in place, ready to go, so that this wood economy that we're trying to develop for the future, is going to be able to absorb a lot of that and then put it to useful use, and create opportunities and economic opportunities for the people that are engaged in it.
Yeah. And I think your point about, making sure you have those market connections is one of the key things in all of this. And again, you start to scratch the surface, and you find that there's a lot of people out there who one way or another need wood, and they're really glad to find out about you.
Yeah. And back to biochar really briefly, that's a good example. That's a big emerging market in Virginia. We've got, two biochar producers, already up and running in Virginia. And this has probably happened in the last maybe 5 to 7 years, roughly.
Hmm.
And up until that point, a lot of people were like shipping biochar in from Wyoming and Colorado and places, Montana. And it was just like, we've got so much material here in Virginia, that can be made into biochar that certainly, there's economic opportunity for somebody out there.
Yeah.
And fortunately for us, that those somebodies have started to appear and they've been able to, start using some of the materials in this, market that there is, some of the feedstock. But trust me, and Morgan will agree with me, there's just so much more, that can be utilized.
Yeah. And just the other week, a company came in who wants a huge amount of wood chips because they produce mushrooms and they need the carbon stock for growing the mushrooms. But then once then their byproduct goes to urban agricultural programs as well. So you're it's this cascading, rippling economic effects that one has, which is pretty amazing. Next slide. So in expanding the financial proposition for this is one, first is you're avoiding a lot of costs. Second is that you're creating self-supporting revenue for these operations. And very rarely in municipal government uh, do you have people saying, "Oh, we'd like to stand up a whole new section in our forestry, and it's going to pay for itself." They'll think that you've been doing something, and be kind of curious, but it turns out to be actually true. And it also really builds constituent and administrative support for innovative and cost-effective approaches for providing public services. And that has rippling effects too. So then you start to look around at other city agencies and saying, like, what can we do to avoid costs? That there's different kinds of ways of thinking about how we run things rather than just we need more tax revenue, right? Is to say, well, actually, there we could be more cost effective and avoid costs, and we'll find new ways to operate things and be innovative. And it gets, frankly, it gets the constituents in the places where you're operating, the people who live where you are, actually kind of excited about public government and what they're doing, and so in addition to being excited about the wood, they're excited about the organization itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thought of all the material that comes out of an urban area or municipality, and that generating revenue, and then that revenue going back into the tree program, of that same municipality. I mean, like you said, it's a win-win, because this material, which previously was sent somewhere, and never to be seen again, is all of a sudden, creating money that can go back into the green infrastructure program of the community from whence it came.
Yeah.
And so, that avoids, like Morgan was saying, the fact that you had to go back, to administration year after year and say, we need more money for the budget. We need more money for the budget, because you're starting to create this mechanism that is self-supporting and feeds itself. And like you said, also the constituent support for this is really great because when you involve the private sector, it shows that the municipality is not just trying to do this all themselves, it's trying to, use money, to support this, new project. The fact that, that the private sector is really the big beneficiary of this whole thing.
Right.
And so consequently, it's got a lot of constituent support and administrations, they're starting to kind of get that picture and they're like, oh yeah, this
Right.
is working well. And so
Yeah,
that's what it's all about.
exactly. Next slide. So some concluding thoughts, and I'm going to ad lib a little bit here from what Joe was just saying too. So in terms of urban and community forestry, there's an opportunity for full life cycle of trees. And what Joe was just saying, caused me to think about, well, what's the phrase for the full life cycle financial model, right? There's also a financial model that goes along with this that is innovative. And that is something that, all of us can share and learn from. It depends upon an inclusive approach to the benefits, services, and goods, and that we prioritize all of them. It also is important to think small and adaptively. We're not going to take over, huge markets, and the localness of this is something that's really crucial. And it's the main thing is not how big can we go, but how much we can use, and to use in smart and efficient ways. And there's opportunities and mutual benefits to connect rural and urban forestry. And sometimes those two different industries sort of look at each other with suspicion. And there's some maybe perhaps even divisiveness among natural resource agencies. But it actually is a win-win between rural and urban forestry, because public appreciation for forest management and wood products can go across that whole expanse. And it's an opportunity in urban areas, and urban people have a perspective on what they think forest management should be doing out in those rural areas, is to actually appreciate the value and respect the people who are working in those rural areas. And we all benefit when everyone appreciates wood in their lives and the spirituality that goes along with it. It also creates an opportunity for wood operations and capacity practices and insights from these diverse contexts. And because urban and community forestry is small and adaptive, perhaps that will also give us new ideas about how people working in rural areas can learn maybe not necessarily the exact practices, but the ways of thinking for how to be adaptive and perhaps inform new generations of forest production coming out of rural areas.
Yeah, great points. And just a couple comments. When we're talking thinking small to start with, you should also act small. This is
Yeah.
going to sound
Yeah.
very cliche-ish, but most communities that start an urban wood program start with building a table. That's it, a table. That somebody has an idea, they go to administration. We've got this big tree coming down in town. It has to be removed due to end of life cycle or whatever. And we want to create a table. And that table is the launching point from everything forward. I can't tell you how many times, that we've had communities start with just that. We're
Yeah.
creating a table, and then upon that table, everything is built because people see that table, they start asking questions, where it came from, how you did it, and what you're trying to do. And then all of a sudden, it just starts building and building and building, which is absolutely great. And so, that in itself, is really just a great starting point. And we're, collectively, and I'm using the we, we're here as resource professionals to try to make that happen and to try to guide the municipalities, through the process. And I don't know where we are quite on time yet. We're probably getting pretty close, but one quick point, as far as the public appreciation for forest management and wood products, one of the best things that we've been able to do in Virginia is work with high schools and our universities and getting local wood into the hands of those people, who are learning about it, into the carpentry classes, into industrial design classes and architectural design classes on the university level, to the fact that this urban wood or that they're using is coming out of the community in which they're living right now. And that is so meaningful, and that helps to connect them to wood products and the fact that wood is good, so
Yeah.
to speak. So yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, we're at the end of our slides. Hopefully we're not at the end of our time, and we're happy to take some questions or have a conversation.
Thank you so much. We have the question and answers feature, but before we wrap up, I do actually want to repost the after party link where everybody can join, and this won't be a webinar format, so we can take questions face to face, chat, and just convene more over urban book programs. So there's the after party link once again. Completely optional, but please join us for about 30 more minutes where Dr. Morgan and Joe are going to be available for way more Q&A and interaction with everybody. And then lastly, before we drop off, I want to share a QR code and survey for the continuing education units. I believe is the acronym, the CEUs for the ISO certification. Let me go back to my screen with the QR code. And Jamie also wanted me to share once again that the coaching network is taking a slight hiatus this summer, but it will be back soon and better than ever. Please stay tuned to receive more invitations to the new Improved Coaching Network later this year. Like I said, please complete the survey. I'm also going to post a link in the chat to the survey, actually, to file your info so that we can submit your attendance to the International Society of Arborists for your CEUs. You must complete the survey in order to receive the credits. So once again, there's a survey link, and I'm going to stop my recording right here and invite everybody to join Dr. Morgan, Joe, and I for the after party at the link that I posted up above, where we'll take answers, questions, and just chat a little more. Thank you, everybody. Oh, that's my recording here. And feel free to drop off once you have your survey link. All right, everybody. Joe, I will join you in the after party, and I'm closing out. Thank you, everybody. See you at the other link.